My friend liked to play pranks, but I wish he had stopped after he died. Louis had always been the class clown. I had known him since elementary school, and he never failed to make me laugh, albeit at the expense of someone else. Itching powder, thumbtack on the teacher's chair, electric hand buzzers, etc., etc. As we got older, his pranks got nastier. Once a teacher gave him an F on a big test, and in retaliation he broke into their car and smeared fish guts under the floor mats. They could never completely get the smell out and eventually got rid of the car. A few months ago, we had our prom and went to a party afterwards. I'm not too experienced with drinking and was pretty trashed after a few beers and shots. But Louis kept going and going until he suddenly just seemed to disappear from the party. It turns out he had locked himself in one of the upstairs bathrooms and ended up dying from alcohol poisoning that night. Following a wake his family held for him, me and his friends George and Travis got together to hang out and talk about the good times we had all shared. Then Travis pulled a Ouija board out of his backpack. "Come on, want to talk to Louis again, guys?" he asked. I wasn't too big on the idea, but everyone else was really into it and I eventually relented. We formed a circle around the board and placed our fingertips on the planchette. "Are there any spirits here?" I asked. Then the planchette began to move. GETFUCKED. "Okay, come on guys, who did that?" I was cut off by the planchette violently jerking our hands from letter to letter. LETMEGO. IWASATREST. The lights in the room slowly began to brighten and fade like someone was playing with a dimmer switch, and I felt the temperature drop until I could see my breath. I was at rest. Travis whimpered. We had all pulled our hands off the planchette, but it was still moving around, sliding from letter to letter, seemingly guided by some otherworldly force. The lights got brighter and brighter until the bulbs overhead exploded and we were plunged into darkness. I heard Travis scream, and I pulled up the flashlight on my phone to see that the planchette had firmly lodged itself into his throat, and he was now sputtering and gurgling on his back. We called an ambulance for him, and he ended up being okay, but that was just the start of the heinous shit that would follow. The next morning I woke up and went to the bathroom to pee. Peeping out of one groggy eye, I aimed for the center of the bowl, but some magical force field stopped my urine from hitting the water and splattered all over the seat and floor. The fuck? I thought out loud as I lifted the seat to find that somebody had saran wrapped over the bowl. I lived alone with my mother and knew she couldn't have had anything to do with this. Then it hit me that Louis had pulled this very prank at a sleepover we had had years before. Things continued on like this for a few days. I would wake up and find a rubber spider on my chest, or that someone had replaced the sugar for my coffee with salt. Then one day, I went to put my sneakers on and felt a sharp pain. I yelped and pulled my foot out to find that someone had placed broken glass in the bottom of the shoe. I reached out to Travis and George to see if they had been having similar experiences, and I wasn't ready for what they told me. George told me he had woken up to a loud banging coming from his closet. He grabbed his glasses from the nightstand beside him and quickly shoved them onto his face to investigate. He said he wished he had turned on the light first because he may have noticed the rusty nail that had been driven through the left frame. It had skewered his eye like a shish kebab, and when he tore the glasses off, he ripped the eye right out of the socket. His parents found him in hysterics, his eye hanging from the optical nerve, bouncing off of his cheek like a fleshy game of paddleball. Travis had similar stories, but none were as horrific as poor George, who ended up having his left eye removed and replaced with a glass one. We decided that tomorrow we would get together once more with the Ouija board and try talking to Louis. We met up the next day at Louis's mother's house. We asked her if we could hang out in our friend's old room for a while. She told us we could, but she had some errands to run, so we would be alone for the next couple of hours. I felt the temperature drop once again as we entered Louis's bedroom. It had been left untouched since his death, except for the urn on his dresser, along with a framed photograph of him next to it that had been taken just weeks before his passing. We set the Ouija board up once again at the foot of his bed. My heart raced as I placed my fingertips on the planchette. "Louis, are you there?" I called out. Nothing but silence followed. "Louis!" Travis and George called out to the empty room. I was about to take my fingers off the board when George's shoelaces began to crawl out of his sneakers like ropey snakes and wrap themselves around his neck. He tried to get his fingers under them, but to no avail. Travis began backing up from the board and bumped into the dresser, knocking the urn off of it and sending it to the floor where it smashed into a million pieces. I looked up at Travis and screamed. Behind him, the photograph of Louis had come alive. It was banging on the glass frame and screaming something at us. George was turning purple on the ground, and his eyes were bulging out of his head. His glass eye had popped out and rolled off somewhere into the room. I ran over to the frame and smashed it on the corner of the desk. "Louis, let George go, please." I stared at the photograph of Louis. It was now smiling and laughing. Then it spoke in an unfamiliar, deep voice. "Your friend Louis is dead. Don't you want to join him?" I was shocked. I just stood there frozen beside Travis when I heard the tinkering of broken urn pieces moving around on the ground beside us. I looked up just in time to see Louis's ashes and broken bits of urn go sailing upwards like a blast from a fire hose. They hit Travis's face and began filling his mouth, ears, and nose until there was nothing left on the ground. Travis began to shake and sputter before breaking out into full-on convulsions. His belly began extending until it was almost the size of a beach ball. I started to back away from Travis, but his stomach burst open, sending a mass of steaming entrails to paint the contents of the room. Coughing, I pulled a piece of Travis out of my mouth and realized I was still holding the photograph, but Louis was no longer in it. Disoriented, I tripped over George's now lifeless body. I picked myself up off of the ground and ran into the bathroom to try and wash Travis's guts off of myself. I began splashing water on my face, but when I checked the mirror, Louis was behind me. I spun around, but nobody was there. I threw off my blood-soaked hoodie and ran out of the house and down the street. Every car window I glanced into, I could see Louis's grinning face right behind me. I've ran deep into the woods and barricaded myself into a little foxhole. I'm prepared to starve to death before facing whatever entity is pretending to be Louis. A day has passed now since all this happened. My phone battery is almost dead, and I wanted to post this to explain to everyone what happened to my friends while I have the chance. I can see my reflection in my phone's screen, and I can also make out Louis' face right behind mine. If I die, there's nobody left for Louis. Nobody, except for you reading this. I hope you don't have access to a Ouija board. My husband keeps calling me Judy, but that's not my name, and I'm afraid for my life. I'm sitting here trying not to feel foolish, too scared to leave my bedroom. I don't know what to do. I'm at my wit's end. Please help. My husband is just outside the door, and I'm afraid what he'll do if I... Oh God, that sounds like he's... No, let me explain. Ricky and I were on a hiking trip earlier this week. We were winding along a trail deep in a gorge, and it was just after sunset, so the gorge was dark with shadows. I never saw anything myself, but Ricky swore he spotted a lost child. He went off the path with our dog Gordy. I couldn't keep up. Eventually he came back, looking anguished. Gordy had apparently run off snarling into the darkness, and he worried our pit bull was going to maul some lost kid out there. "I don't know what's gotten into him," he said. "Gordy is a good dog most of the time, but he can be aggressive with strangers coming to our home. It wasn't completely outside the realm of possibility for him to bite if he thought we were threatened. Though it seemed odd a child would trigger that response." I pressed my husband for a description of this child, and he admitted he didn't get a good look, but said he thought the kid was naked, and that he mostly thought it was a child because he heard talking. I suggested he may have heard a baby deer or other animal, and wouldn't that be something Gordy would be more likely to chase? And wouldn't a talking kid, answer our shouts? He agreed. Even so, we searched a while longer before the twilight became too dark and we returned to the cabin where we were staying. The next morning, Gordy was back, scratching at the cabin door. We'd lost the spark for hiking, so cut our trip short and drove back home. That's when it all got strange. I have insomnia sometimes, so I stay downstairs watching TV while Ricky sleeps upstairs. I was on the sofa, glazed over watching some late-night show when I heard talking. I assumed it was Ricky, but I couldn't make out any distinct words. I called out, and there was no reply. I went back to watching my show, but a while later heard it start again, so I got up and went into the kitchen. There was a child in our kitchen, or at least that was my first impression in the dim lighting. But it wasn't a child. It was Gordy. Our dog was standing on his hind legs, just standing in the middle of the room, shoelaces of drool dribbling from his jaws, and he was making these grunting sounds. He stopped the moment I came in, and he was back on all fours again, looking at me. When I told Ricky, he said I must have been seeing things. But I'm telling you, the dog was on his hind legs, trying to talk. Next morning, Ricky kept teasing me about Gordy and saying stuff to our dog like, "Hey Gordy, grab me a cup of coffee, would ya?" Or, "Hey, can you answer the phone for me?" Gordy would just stare at him. Honestly, he was still acting a little strange, but after Ricky's teasing, I was done worrying about the dog, so I left for work. I was on lunch break when I got the text from Ricky. "Ricky, heard talking. Thought it was you, but just found Gordy downstairs. Something wrong. He's making weird noises and think he's got mange. He's losing some skin. OMW to vet." I called, but Ricky never talks on the phone while driving, so it didn't surprise me it went to voicemail. I texted him to call me after he got to the vet. After work, I checked my phone. Ricky hadn't texted. On my drive home, I tried calling multiple times to no answer. Ricky was not home. Most vets close by 6 p.m., so where was my husband? I checked his location on my phone, and to my surprise, he wasn't far at all, maybe 10 minutes away. So I drove out there. It was on a country road, the route we take to the emergency vet, and at first, I didn't see his car anywhere. I finally found it when I noticed some of the grass flattened beside the road and that his car had veered off into a ditch. By now, the sun was setting. I noticed the driver door open and muddy footprints. Ricky's phone was in the passenger seat. I followed the tracks, but they vanished in the grass, and I walked around calling for Ricky and stopped when I found Gordy. Or rather, what was left of Gordy. I should have taken a picture, but I was so distressed. It was our Gordy, but it was like something had split him in half, like those pig carcasses you see hanging from meat hooks at slaughterhouses. I could count his ribs. I called the cops. They came out and examined the scene of the accident, but after looking at the footprints, concluded it was only Ricky who'd been out here. They seemed to suspect my husband must have done this to Gordy, even though I told them Ricky had been on the way to the vet. I started to tell them about Gordy's weird behavior the night before, but that really made them skeptical. I wanted them to go full crime scene and tape off the area and take photos, but apparently that kind of investigation is not done for dead dogs. When I came home, I was exhausted and upset. I saw lights on in the house. Relief washed over me because that meant Ricky was home. But when I opened the front door, the first thing I noticed was the dirt tracked inside. Ricky and I always remove our shoes when entering. Also, I could hear him talking, but it was just like Gordy the other night. Talking, but not talking. These odd syllables, like someone mimicking the act of talking. All of this chilled me to the bone as I crept around the corner so I could see him in the den, standing there, unnaturally stiff and straight, sort of swaying. I called, "Honey?" His gibberish immediately ceased. His head turned and, I swear it was like he reached up and folded his skin over his face, like a sticker that has started to peel at the corner and that he smoothed back into place. I heard him say, very clearly this time, "Honey?" I ran upstairs to our bedroom and slammed the door and locked it. I could hear him roaming around outside. Occasionally he called for me, "Honey?" I dropped my phone in the hallway. I was too scared to go and grab it. Instead, I stayed hidden up here, listening to the sound of the TV downstairs. At one point, the news anchor said, "Reports of sunny weather coming up." And I heard Ricky's voice, clear and distinct. "Sunny weather coming up." Then he cleared his throat and called loudly, "Honey, reports of sunny weather coming up." Every so often, he came up to try a new phrase on me. The last time he came upstairs, I was sobbing and yelled through the door, "What about Gordy? What the fuck happened to Gordy?" He laughed, a weird, high-pitched laugh that sounded just like a laugh from a woman on TV, not at all like his normal laugh. And he said, "Gordy's fine, honey, Gordy's fine." "My name's not Honey," I shouted back. "Call me by name. You know my name. It's Judy." "Open the door, Judy, honey," he said. "Judy, open the door." But my name's not Judy either. It's Claire. Judy is his mother's name. Whatever is down there wearing my husband's face, it's far, far too clever, the way it tried to quickly reassure me. And I know I have to call the police and tell them something's wrong, and that if they interview him, they'll see he won't be able to answer correctly. They'll realize something's not right. I finally managed to creep out and grab my phone and sneak back in while he was still watching television. But now I'm terrified, because right after I scurried back in and locked the door, he came up. He must have heard me, and he knocked. And I am so chilled. I'm not sure if I can convince police of the danger now. Because this last time, after he so very politely knocked, he said, "Honey," he said it smugly, confidently. "Honey, open up. Everything's fine. Claire, honey, open the door, Claire." My coworkers set me up on a blind date. It went well, but they are acting weird about it. I, 34M, separated from my wife in early 2023 and divorced in early 2024. It was a pretty nasty breakup, and I moved to Chicago for a job to get away. I pretty much kept to myself at first, but was friendly with a couple coworkers, John 26M and Mark 26M. They were younger than me, but it was easier to bond with them, as we were the only single guys in the office. We really hit it off this summer and hung out weekly, went to the Pitchfork Festival together, and really started to click. I really felt like I was coming out of my shell. A month ago, they were talking about their dating experiences and asked me about mine. I admitted I hadn't been on a date since my wife, and they both kind of shut up and looked awkward. The next night we were out for drinks, and they mentioned that they wanted to set me up with a friend of theirs, Sarah 26F. Mark showed me a picture of her on his phone, and I thought she was cute and said okay. They both looked at each other with a weird smirk on their faces, but agreed to set it up. I thought I knew what the look was about. She was a bigger girl, and I'm a bigger guy, so it made sense to them. But maybe they were unsure if they were being rude or not. I thought she was cute, though, so didn't bother me, and let it slip out of my mind. We set it up for the next weekend, and I went. When I arrived at the restaurant, I spotted Sarah, waved and walked over, but it was weird. Sarah acted like she didn't know me and was here meeting someone else. I pulled out my phone and told her Mark had set up the date and showed her the text from him with her picture. She looked at the phone for a second and looked like she was going to cry. I quickly apologized and told her I would leave if she was uncomfortable. She paused for a second and then assured me we should continue the date. I'll be honest, the first 20 minutes I almost got up and left. She looked miserable. I have no idea what was going on, but she looked like she had just been told she was the worst person alive. I don't know what made me do it. I guess because it was going so poorly, I just lost any nerves I had and was much more confident than I had been at the beginning of the date. Or maybe I just wanted to cheer her up. She was wearing a beautiful top that really showed off her cleavage. So at one point, when she was about to cry again, I just leaned in and said, "I think you are absolutely beautiful in that top. I'm sorry if I keep staring, but everything about this makes me happy to be here." She stared at me for a second, blushed, smiled, and actually became present for the date. We talked about her job, how she got to Chicago, how she had grown up with Mark and John. She mentioned she was trying to go through all the Criterion Collection films, and we bonded over a shared goal of seeing them all and a shared annoyance that they add new films faster than we can watch them. After dinner, we walked around downtown to the park and somehow stayed out until after midnight. I know because she was visibly upset about how to get home, so I offered my place that was within walking distance. Honestly, we didn't even have sex that night. We just talked and cuddled as we fell asleep. I told her about my divorce and how hurt I had been when I caught my wife blah blah blah. I hadn't actually said it out loud, but Sarah just made me comfortable. We have been together ever since, and the relationship is better than it ever was with my wife. I know it's only been a month, but mark my words, I will marry this girl. But the reason I'm here is that Mark and John have been really weird about it. I asked Mark the next day why Sarah thought she was meeting someone else, and he just said that Sarah didn't want a picture, and he must have described me poorly. But when I talked about Sarah that Monday, they both seemed off. They couldn't believe I had a good time, and John has been really annoyed. Whenever I bring her up, he leaves the room. They keep canceling on me too, mostly because I want to bring Sarah. We'll have plans, and then when I say I want to bring her, they will cancel. I think they might be jealous that I'm in a relationship. Not sure. I think I may bring this up with Sarah though, and just see what's going on. The vibes have been super weird. There's this girl at school who will not leave me alone for a reason only God knows. Her name's Lauren, and ever since transferring to this new school for my second year of high school, she has had this strange fixation of annoying me and trying to piss me off. I'm 5'3", yes, I'm freaking short for a guy. She's 6'4" and on the volleyball team, and can easily physically overpower me. Let me explain the things crazy Princess Pink would do to me. Yet, I never see her do this to anyone else. Like, nearly every single day, she'd sneak up on me and put me in a headlock and will not let me go for several minutes and make fun of me. Nobody helps. Some will say I let him go, but I guess they're afraid. The weird part is that she will get very pissed when one of her friends do it to me. Yep, they're pretty tall. Who knew volleyball girls are giants? She will sit behind me or beside me during class and will poke at me, pull my hair, throw stuff at me, and whisper things like loser, shrimp, smurf, chicken, Stuart Little in every conversation, and she will cheat off my paper during quizzes. Forces me to sit with her during lunch all the time and will get pissed if I don't and put me in a chokehold. Whenever she has a game, she threatens me to go watch her, which I refused, and she chased me around with a freaking rake. I wish I was making this stuff up. I really do. She's insane. She will fucking steal my stuff and give them back a day or two later. WTF. Like one time one of my shoes went missing, and I found it in her bag, and I got mad at her about it, but she kept denying. And there was this time that I left my phone on my desk. When I came back, she was trying to unlock it. She'll trip me in the halls or in class, and one time she pranked me by replacing my pen with one that had a buzzer in it. Here's an odd part. One time she asked me if I wanted a ride back to my house because her dad's picking her up. I said no, yet she forced me. But during the ride home, she acted like fucking normal person for once. Finally, one time I brought an old plushie of mine to school. She grabbed it, called me a little baby. I tried to get it back from her, but, like the dick she is, she taunts me to reach it and pushes me around with her height, then tosses it to her friends back and forth. But, God forbid she sees someone else doing it to me and she will get really heated. She follows me around in the godam halls just to make fun of me. I'm really thinking of reporting her. What is wrong with her? Does she not know how to read social cues? Has this happened to any of you? Any advice? Please.